of William Barrett, a pioneer for Aboriginal people in the 19th century, fighting for equality and land rights. I'm here today to welcome you all to the land of my ancestors. We call the land within our tribal boundaries our country. The Kulin Nation, Kulin meaning man, is made up of 5 groups. They are the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung, Boonwurrung, Tanarong, Wathaurong and Dja Dja Wurrung. And to give you an outline of the Wurundjeri country and the area we cover. Wurundjeri country extends from north to the Great Dividing Range, east to Mount Baw Baw, south to the Moorallie Creek and west to the Werribee River. We cover a diverse range of land from the mountains to the beach and everything in between. Many thousands of years ago, if an Aboriginal person from another tribe wanted to cross our boundary, they would have to sit at the boundary and wait for the Narragadah, which is the headman, or an elder to come past to give permission to cross. Traditional Aboriginal culture was highly territorial, and visitors risked a violent reprisal for crossing a tribal or clan boundary without this permission, and this is how a welcome to country originated in our culture. Traditionally, being welcomed onto country meant you respected Bunjil's law. Bunjil, the wedge-tailed eagle, is our creator, and Wah the crow is our protector. And as long as you looked after the country, you had access to our waterways and our land resources. And when you enter our country, we ask that you respect our resources, our fauna, flora and water, as they are very special to us. And when you are ready to leave, we ask that you leave it the way you found it.
Welcome to the Council meeting. I'm Councillor Piers Tyson, Mayor of Moonee Valley City Council. We aim to get started every second Tuesday at 6:30pm. However, sometimes there are some delays behind the scenes that we need to work through, and we appreciate your patience. You can have a look at our agenda online for all the issues that we'll be talking about tonight, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks. So every second Tuesday we work through our council agenda, and what that means is working through things from procedural, day-to-day issues, financial reports, all the way up to the most important things in Moonee Valley, in Victoria or in Australia. And councillors can put up alternatives to that, can put up our staff officers' recommendation, and we can debate that and vote yes or no at the end of the day. Welcome everyone to the Council meeting for the 14th of February 2023, which I now declare open. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to members of the public gallery who have joined us tonight, as well as those watching at home on the internet. As well as being live streamed, the video recording of this meeting will also be available on our website, so attendees in the gallery are advised that their presence may be recorded. I also ask that mobile phones be switched to silent mode during the meeting. On behalf of Moonee Valley City Council, I respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which Moonee Valley is located, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nations, and we pay respects to their spirits, ancestors, community members and elders past, present and emerging. We also extend this respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. We now move to item 2 on the agenda, apologies and leave of absence, and councillors, I have not received any apologies, and note that there is a full suite of councillors. To item 3, the confirmation of minutes. Councillors, can I please have a mover and seconder that the minutes from the council meeting held on the 31st of January 2023 be confirmed? Moved Councillor Nation, seconded Councillor Hodgson. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Item 4, declarations of conflict of interest. Does any councillor have a conflict of interest in any item on the agenda this evening? Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor. I've got a general conflict of interest in item 12.1 for reasons previously disclosed to the CEO in writing prior to the commencement of tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Are there any others? No? We now move on to item 5, presentations. Councillors, do we have any presentations this evening? Councillor Isa.
Thanks, Mayor. On a sad note, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge and pay tribute to a very much loved member of the Flemington community who passed away in tragic circumstances on the 3rd of February following an accident on the 1st of February. Ali assisted children cross busy Flemington roads for 20 years. He was known to families of Flemington Primary School, Mount Alexander College, St Brendan's and Flemington Street Childcare. Ali was tiny in stature and giant in patience, commitment, care and good humour. By walking into the traffic each day to protect children, Ali, like all of our crossing supervisors, made an enormous contribution to the Moonee Valley community. We extend our deepest sympathy to his wife and children and his wider circle of family and his many, many friends. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. And on another tragic note, I'd like to acknowledge the earthquake that occurred in Syria and Turkey last week and reflect on the devastating impact that that's had. It's saddening to watch the destruction that's occurred and hear the many people, not only in those countries, but in our community, who have been so severely impacted by this unprecedented disaster, particularly for our local Syrian and Turkish communities. Would any other councillor like to? Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. On Sunday the 5th of February, our council took a historic step and for the first time ever marched in the annual Midsummer Pride March along Fitzroy Street in St Kilda. The Pride March started back in 1996 when Melbourne's LGBTQIA community took to the streets in a show of solidarity and protest in the long-held fight against injustice, for equal rights and for marriage equality. Councillor Isa, Councillor Adams and I, alongside our CEO, members of our executive leadership team and a large group of officers and residents took part in the march on the day. We were lucky enough to have one of Australia's premier drag queens, Karen from Finance, march alongside us. And whilst we all got our fair share of high fives and smiles, I think it's fair to say that Karen definitely stole the show on the day. I want to take this opportunity to thank all of those who took part in the day, but especially the officers who worked so hard to coordinate this special event, organise our banners and these awesome t-shirts, which is what I'm wearing here today. It's so heartening to see people at our point at our group and say, oh look, it's Moonee Valley, and to speak with people before and after the march who expressed how proud they were to see us marching. Our t-shirts read, "Equality lives here," and I couldn't think of a more fitting phrase. As someone who grew up and came out in a Conservative council, I could have only wished to have seen my council march in the Pride March, yet raise the rainbow flag during the Midsummer Pride period. To all those who are in the LGBTQIA plus community in Moonee Valley, I say that you are welcome here and that we're here to represent you. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Would any other councillors like to present on any item? I'll finally acknowledge the passing of former Essendon City Council Mayor Ian Blair. Ian served 2 terms on the Essendon City Council as Mayor from 1977 to 78 and 1984 to 85. Among his achievements on council, he contributed to the building and opening of the Ascot Vale Leisure Centre in 1977 and was also actively involved with the Clock Tower Centre, as it was then the Community Civic Centre. Ian advocated for the construction of the Civic Centre, the building that we're in today, rather than removing the Town Hall. His contributions will be remembered, and I extend my sympathies to his family and friends all around Australia. Thank you. Councillors, we now move on to item 6, petitions and joint letters, and do we have any this evening? Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to table a joint letter received from residents in Essendon North requesting traffic safety improvements and parking controls review in Birdwood Street, Dudley Street and surrounding streets in Essendon North due to a recent pedestrian/vehicle accident.
Thank you, Councillor Nation, and in accordance with Governance Rule 62.4, I refer the letter to the CEO for consideration. Councillors, are there any other petitions or joint letters? Thank you. Item 7 is public question time, and we've received 2 pre-submitted questions this evening. Both questions are from Mr. Logan Shield, who has indicated he won't be present this evening to read his question, so I'll read in his words. Question 1 is, what was the approximate cost to council for clean-up, remediation, rebuilding, etc. from the Maribyrnong River flood in October 2022? And I refer to the CEO, Helen Swee, to respond.
Thank you, Logan. Through the Mayor, the approximate cost to council for flood response, relief and recovery from the Maribyrnong River flood in October 2022 was $1.4 million. This approximate cost includes funding made available by the Victoria State Government and the costs recovered from council's insurers. Thank you.
Thank you. And the second question is in Logan's words. A report titled Community Emissions Reduction Analysis, dated 4 February 2022, by Point Advisory, outlines the effective actions council should take to help play our part in tackling climate change. As it stands, none of the opportunities identified have been implemented, nor is there an implementation plan. When can we expect to see action to help reduce community-wide emissions? And I refer to our CEO to respond.
Thank you, Logan. Through the Mayor, we are creating a community panel to provide recommendations to Council on initiatives to help reduce community emissions. 15,000 community members have been invited to register for selection onto the panel, so we can have a diverse range of people join, representative of Moonee Valley's demographic. While Council can help facilitate, educate, and advocate for low-carbon behaviours in our community, we generally cannot enforce such behaviours. We need the cooperation of residents, workers, and visitors to drive down emissions. Some examples of what Council is already doing to encourage low-carbon living include providing free energy assessment to eligible residents and businesses, providing funds to community groups and businesses through our biannual grant program to help with the cost of upgrades and running local events, providing free green living workshops with advice on how residents can live more sustainably, encouraging active transport, for instance, upgrading the Moonee Ponds Creek shared path, encouraging electric vehicle use by installing 2 public EV charging points in Ascot Vale, future rollout of food and garden organic services to all households, aligned with the state government's curbside recycling reform. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next item on the agenda is reports from delegates. Councillors, are there any reports as your responsibility relates to delegates? Yes, Councillor Isa.
Thanks, Mayor. As the delegate for the MAV, which is the Municipal Association of Victoria, I just wanted to mention briefly the leadership conference that was held at Essendon Fields in Moonee Valley last Friday. It was attended by the Mayor and Councillor Adams and myself, and many MAV delegates and councillors from around Victoria. Highlights included Raph Epstein telling us to be direct and say less to avoid the dystopian future of a brave new world. Mark from Common Cause reminding us that 90% of human thought happens beneath our level of consciousness, and that most of the time people are not making decisions based on facts. And Louise Marler teaching us that if a right-hand person looks left when they are speaking, they are probably lying. So it was an engaging and very useful program for councillors. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Some interesting insights there. Are there any other reports from delegates? No. We'll now move on to item 9, reports, and item 9.1 is response to Notice of Motion 2022-24, Dogs on Leash. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation, please.
Thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Adams, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. Happy with the officer's recommendations here that have come out of the service, the sub-service review on animal management. I've had many complaints from our residents who have been concerned about dog owners letting their dogs off leash in areas that are not off leash areas. I'm hoping we can now improve and implement more educational signage regarding dog walking, identify areas needing more signage, and evaluate the need for proactive park patrols during peak times, which I think will help to create more awareness and education around the rules and expectations of responsible dog walking to ensure everyone can enjoy our open spaces and are able to walk safely in Moonee Valley. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Adams, for bringing the original motion and then for moving this officer's recommendation. And thank you to officers for what's, I think, a really insightful report and response to the notice of motion. Essentially a two-pronged approach of the education and something quite immediate that we can do of putting a little bit more signage out there so people understand, you know, where they can safely walk their dogs off leash or on leash. And then the second prong being, you know, some greater, potentially a medium-term solution with some greater monitoring and enforcement where necessary to help our community to stay safe and enjoy our parks. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Councillor Isa.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the majority of dog owners who absolutely do the right thing, and also, I guess, ask people who are walking their dogs to please look around and see if there are signs. If there's no sign that says it's an off-leash dog park, that means the dog needs to stay on a lead. And that's for the safety of the dog and the safety of kids playing, the safety of other park users. I'm really pleased to see this report, and thanks for bringing it by that notice of motion, Councillor Adams. I have had quite a few concerns, particularly concerns expressed to me by people, members of the community, particularly when Fairburn Park was out of action. Fairburn Park is probably our biggest off-leash dog park. When it was affected by the floods, it was out of action and many people took their dogs to other parks, leading to quite a few complaints and conflicts. So glad to see that we're perhaps taking some action to put up some more signs and also look at the hours of patrolling, but just again ask people to look around, see if there's a sign and take care of other park users. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Would any other councillor like to speak on the motion? If not, and since there has been no opposition to the motion, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? and that is carried unanimously. Item 9.2 is response to joint letter parking permit allocations in Regent Street, Ascot Vale. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
Mayor, I'd like to move the officer's recommendation with an additional point D that reads, survey residents, and then in brackets including tenants, in close brackets, in 12 months about the effectiveness of the parking changes and inform councillors of the outcome.
Thank you, Councillor Isa, and can I ask that all councillors are aware of what's being moved? Is there a seconder? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thanks, Mayor. This motion stems from a letter that was brought to council by some residents who have been in the unfortunate position where they're in a multi-dwelling complex where permits are not issued to all tenants, and that's a long-standing policy of council where there's been subdivision. Council doesn't issue parking permits to the different dwellings. This has caused some issues for the residents, for the tenants, and in fact not just them but many. I think the Regent Street Council's had multiple appeals over many years for people living in that situation. I'd like to thank officers for really taking these concerns seriously and looking at what might be able to be done to alleviate this problem for these particular tenants. Unfortunately, and I know that this is disappointing for the tenants involved, for the residents involved, we just can't make exceptions to the policy. If we did that, we would create a situation, an unsustainable situation across the municipality, whereby we just could not provide on-street parking that would meet the demand. It would just be impossible. So I know this is disappointing for the residents, but I do think that the officers have worked hard to find a creative solution, which is to remove the permit parking overnight on the northern side of part of Regent Street, to create some non-permit parking that frees that up for these residents and others who don't have parking permits. I have added that last point D so that we can look at how it works over 12 months, survey people in the street, and if it's really not working, if it's creating more problems than fixing problems, we can evaluate that and consider what to do then. But I do thank the residents for giving this a go, and hopefully it will create some extra parking opportunities for you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I don't really have much more to add to Councillor Isa's comments. I do understand the frustration, and it's one shared by many tenants and residents in townhouses that, the residents don't feel have adequate on-site parking. One of the things that we might look into is making sure that real estate agents are aware of the rules and aren't giving false information to people applying for those properties, to make sure that everyone's very clear. But we do try and be clear and consistent with the application of our policy. As Councillor Isa said, it's a very long-standing policy, and it's very important to our long-term strategy for town planning. So in this instance, I think I'm looking forward to hopefully the recommended solution from the officers having a positive impact for those who are suffering the parking pressures, and having a look at how that's working in 12 months' time. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I find this a really interesting one because we obviously have not as many permits up in Rosehill Ward, but we still have some permitted areas and we still speak to people with permits. And one of the biggest griefs up where we are is that people who are living in their house on a single block and then their house next door gets knocked down and they might put up, 2, 3, 4, and we sort of say, well, our rules say that they won't get any extra permits with that. And whilst that's not people who are living there tend to understand that. They say, well, at least we're going to have our permitted spot still, and that's not going to be potentially taken away. But in this, we are actually kind of changing some of the rules around that. We're not giving permits to all of the dwellings, which is what the report insinuated they were sort of asking for. We're obviously taking away some of the signage. So it'll be very interesting to see how this does track, because I'm not sure whether this is something that would flow very well in necessarily other streets. I'm mindful that there were stats given to say, I think it was 53 or something, that the utilisation wasn't necessarily that high, and that's why it could potentially be changed. But people get really grumpy when there's cars and multiple cars to what used to be one dwelling or two dwellings or however many dwellings before a big development. So I think we just have to be mindful of everyone's amenity, and it's in a way buyer beware or renter beware. Make sure you know exactly what you're entitled to when you're signing up to a property, and if a car spot is included, and don't necessarily assume.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? If not, I would say that Councillor Byrne spoke in favour of the motion, so I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Item 9.3 is the Audit and Risk Committee Biannual Report, July to December 2022, and unconfirmed minutes of Audit and Risk Committee meeting 12 December 2022 and minutes of ARC meetings June and September 2022. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll move the officer's recommendation, please.
Thank you. And is there a seconder? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor. The Audit and Risk Committee assists Moonee Valley City Council in fulfilling its responsibilities relating to financial and performance reporting, risk management, corporate governance and internal control systems. And the Audit and Risk Committee biannual report is basically a high-level overview summary of the matters the committee has addressed in the reporting period in discharging its responsibilities under its charter. So the report we are receiving and noting details activities undertaken by the committee for the period the 1st of July 2022 to the 31st of December 2022. Some of the highlights were the external audit of Council's financial and performance statements was performed with the conclusion of the statements that the statements were presented fairly. Work on the open internal audit actions continued. 23 actions had been carried forward and 4 audit reports presented during the reporting period. 23 new actions were recorded. 3 actions were closed so that 43 actions remained open. And during the December meeting, the progress of the ITC project was discussed extensively and the committee noted the detailed and open reporting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, the report notes that I'm one of the new members of the Audit and Risk Committee, and it's a really important committee. I'm very pleased to be a part of it, and thanks, Councillor Bedio, for the work you've done over the last year, a couple of years. On the committee, there's obviously, the report also details a lot of work that was done before I was on the committee, and thanks to all the committee members, and a lot of work still to happen in the next 6 months. So there's a lot of compliance and reporting and making sure that all of Council's activities are operating, free of risk. There's no such thing, within the bounds of appropriate risk, and happy to recommend this report to the floor.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Would any other councillor like to speak on the motion? If not, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? It is carried unanimously. Item 9.4 is 2022/23 Q2 Council Expenses Report. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Nation.
I'll move a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Is there a seconder? Councillor Byrne. Councillor Nation.
Just briefly, this is our quarterly reporting. It's from the second quarter of the financial year, 1st of October to the 31st of December 2022. Our expenses are brought to this meeting for them to be published, but they're also available on the website. As you'll see, standard communications, there's some of us that are undertaking training or have attended events, and travel costs as well, which this period includes the advocacy trip that we took to Canberra to connect with politicians to try to get some much needed funding for the Windy Hill precinct. I would just note there is a small anomaly on my expenses because I did reimburse council for my partner's attendance at the 10-year, when I received my 10-year MAV award. Council had to book the tickets together. The reimbursement was after the 31st of December, so I've been told that they'll be corrected on the quarterly, the third quarter report. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Byrne.
Thanks, Mayor. Not a lot further to add, just that obviously we've got our professional development and training expenses in there, and I think it's good to see that there has been a fairly widespread of use of that column, which I think is good. You know, we do a lot of work in this council and we've got to stay on top of things, so it's definitely nothing that we should be shying away from. People want to have good councillors making good decisions, and all of the training, whether that's governance training or finance training or project management training that I'm doing at the moment, whatever it might be doing, I think that it's exciting to see numbers in those columns and councillors going and taking that extra step to become better councillors. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Would any other councillor like to speak? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. On to item 9.5, Building Regulation Reform. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. I wish to move an alternative. The alternative to read that Council resolves to write directly to the Minister for Planning, requesting the Victorian Government to provide clarity around the meaning and operation of sections 106 to 113 of the Building Act 1993 and take any necessary legislative or regulatory reform to allow the municipal building surveyors to continue to carry out their statutory functions effectively, protecting the safety and health of Victorians.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sypek. Councillor Bedio, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. I will briefly. In summary, a recent judgment from the Supreme Court has opened contention around the operation of specific sections of the Building Act 1993, which relate to the enforcement tools available to the municipal building surveyors across the councils in Victoria. I'm not going to go into details as they're quite succinctly laid out in the report. However, the judgment has brought into question the exact extent of the powers available to the MBS to address non-compliance or unsafe building work. The City of Port Phillip is advocating to the M9 group of councils to jointly lobby the Minister for Planning, requesting legislative reform as the council claims that the judgment leads to a significantly reduced scope of what is allowable under building orders made in accordance with the Act. I have moved this alternative as I believe it's proper for us to write directly to the Minister, as I do believe we need to seek some clarification around the operation of these sections. But I've considered that given City of Port Phillip are actually currently appealing the matter that led to this judgment, I think it's proper that we seek our own advocacy in relation to the matter. I've also added, and hence why I've amended to write directly to the Minister as opposed to signing on to the M9's joint letter. I've also made an amendment to state that requesting the Minister to provide clarity as opposed to just taking the necessary legislative or regulatory reform. The issue with this matter is one of interpretation, and it could be that the judgment has misinterpreted the matter, and that in actual fact the powers that are available to the municipal building surveyor are currently available under the Act without any need for reform. But we still do need clarity to be provided from the Minister, just so that we can ensure, or that our municipal building surveyor can ensure that he is operating within the bounds of the Building Act. So, look, not much further to add. Thank you to the officers for putting together the report, and hopefully, if this passes, we can get some further explanations from the Minister for Planning.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Bedio, for bringing up this alternative. I'm fully supportive of this alternative in regards to this issue. I also believe that the judgment is very open-ended and it could be interpreted anyway, and if you get a couple of smart lawyers who can reword this, it's still, it's just a, I think it's just needs clarification, like Councillor Bedio said. And at the end of the day, all we're doing is we're just writing a letter to the Minister.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Isa.
Thanks, Mayor. The work of our inspectors in issuing building orders and the BOM-W, which is a new acronym I've learnt through this, is really critical to making sure that building works go smoothly across the municipality. And as councillors, we often get complaints where that isn't going smoothly, and so it is something that is, the work in this area is really critical, and hence this judgment being quite a significant matter. And so the advocacy of M9 and this report are things that we really need to take quite seriously. Interestingly, and I'm just saying this as someone who is interested in grammar and law and the minutiae of these things, interestingly, this does turn on the Oxford comma that isn't in the particular phrase of section 113. And anyone who's sort of familiar with the history of debates around the Oxford comma will know that that cost a trucking company in the US a lot of money many years ago as to whether or not they were to be paid for their whatever they were doing or not doing with or without the comma. And it's interesting that really this does boil down to the interpretation of a phrase that doesn't have a comma and whether it was meant to be interpreted as though it did have a comma. And the interpretation of it without a comma potentially means that building orders can't be issued for things like combustible cladding, which is obviously something that many councils have had to get onto very quickly and ask for compliance with. So it is an issue of great importance to us. We really need the clarity. However we go about seeking that clarity, whether it's a letter off our own bat or through M9, we do need to do that. So thanks, Councillor Bedio.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Would any other councillor like to speak? No? If not, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. We now move on to item 10, notices of motion, and councillors, we have 6 listed on tonight's agenda. First is 10.1, and I call on Councillor Nation to present his first notice of motion titled Notice of Motion number 2023/05, Soft Plastics Recycling.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that Council resolves to 1. Request the CEO to prepare a report prior to May 2023 outlining possible options for Council to facilitate the diversion of soft plastics from landfill following the suspension of the Red Cycle program statewide, and the costs of such a process for consideration in the 2023-24 annual budget. The report should highlight the following: the potential for soft plastic drop-off at Council facilities, and a review of like municipalities and their service offerings, and any other current or future circular economy opportunities and the potential application within Council's Capital Works program. 2, note that Moonee Valley City Council is already undertaking a number of initiatives in this space, including the transfer station currently accepting clear soft plastics for recycling, which in turn is used in the manufacture of irrigation pipe, outdoor furniture, slip sheets and builder's film. Ongoing discussions with recycling partners regarding their capacity to accept coloured soft plastic, and an in-principle partnership with RMIT for a demonstration project for the use of recycled plastics in asphalt roads to determine its capability to meet current engineering standards for Australian roads and Victorian roads to ensure potential asset life is achieved.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sypek. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak to your notice of motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm extremely pleased to move this notice of motion and for Moonee Valley City Council to step up where Woolies, Coles, the federal and state governments and the Red Cycle scheme couldn't. It was only yesterday that another stockpile of soft plastics were discovered throughout Melbourne's northern and western suburbs. The discovery of these materials brings the total amount of soft plastics hoarded in Melbourne's north and west to 170 tonnes. That is 170,000 kilograms of soft plastic. And given how light these materials are, that is warehouses and warehouses and warehouses full of bundled soft plastics, all stored without a purpose, without a use, becoming an environmental hazard and a fire hazard. Anyone who has made the trek or had made the trek to drop off soft plastics to their local Coles, Woolies or any other Red Cycle drop-off point did so thinking that they were making a small but important difference in diverting soft plastics from landfill, and how they were misled and sold a lie. The reality was nothing was happening to these plastics. In fact, when we stopped shipping them off to Asia to be burnt, it in itself a completely unacceptable practice of dumping our waste and recycling in developing countries, there was no recycling pathway. So if Coles, Woolies and Red Cycle can't step up to the plate and create a project or initiative that ensures these materials are recycled, then the onus is on us as leaders of our community to do so and to step up where they couldn't. And therefore, through this notice of motion, I'm proud to announce and promote that our council is currently accepting clear soft plastics, which can be dropped at the Moonee Valley transfer station. Then, in conjunction with our recycling partners, these soft plastics will be manufactured into irrigation pipe, outdoor furniture, slip sheets and builder's film. Having an end use for our collected soft plastics is critical. It's no good if we're just collecting and storing, because then we are no different and a part of the problem. So accepting clear soft plastics is our start, and then through the great work of our officers and the proposed outcomes in this notice of motion, we will hopefully continue to take further strides in this space and further develop our circular recycling economy. The next step for Moonee Valley will be working with our recycling partners to broaden the current scheme to include coloured soft plastic. We will also undertake further work to look for additional uses for the recycled material. Excitingly, we are also in the process of finalising an in-principle agreement with RMIT University to complete a demonstration project for the use of recycled plastics in asphalt roads. There's still a large amount of work to be done in this space to determine if the end product has the capacity to meet current engineering standards for Australian and Victorian roads, and to ensure that potential asset life is achieved. But it's an extremely exciting initiative, and I look forward to the end results. We need to keep looking at new and innovative ways to tackle this problem, and I'm excited that we're working with great young minds at RMIT to find modern solutions for old problems. I hope my fellow colleagues are as excited about these initiatives as I am, and ask for your support to continue our community's recycling journey. For our residents, I encourage you to drop off your clear soft plastics to the Moonee Valley transfer station on Holmes Road in Moonee Ponds, and hopefully in the next few months you can include your coloured soft plastics in as well. Ultimately, the best outcome is trying to avoid using soft plastics, but the reality is that for many of our residents, even their best intentions still result in a small amount of soft plastic waste. Finally, in closing, I'd like to make a note of one of our local residents, Lucy Green, who started this conversation about soft plastics with me. I think one of the great things about our council is the issues, ideas and recommendations that come from our constituents. And Lucy, I thank you and congratulate you on your advocacy in this space. I commend the motion to my fellow councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Nation, for bringing this to our attention. Moonee Valley was always a leader in local government, and this is now going to perpetuate us back to a position of leadership. Just what Councillor Nation said, how we're actually recycling, we're actually taking the initiative, we're actually going forward, we're doing the right thing, and we're showing the rest of them how to do it. And I'm more than happy to speak to our colleagues in other councils about what we're doing and how we're doing it. So for me, Mr Mayor, this is a great step forward, and I fully support Councillor Nation's notice of motion 100%.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Nation, for bringing the motion forward. I am really pleased to support this motion. It not only notes the good work that we're already doing, but highlights how there's so much more to do, and in a space like this where the circular economy opportunities are pretty limited at the moment, in the short term they're not going to be cost neutral, and we might have to throw some dollars behind it and put our money where our mouth is. It is something that we can take leadership in the space of. Perhaps future technologies will overtake it and it can, move out of the space of public administration. But for now, there's an urgent need, and I'm really happy to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Isa.
Thanks, Mayor. Could I just ask a point of clarification to the mover, if that's...
Through me? Yes.
Through you, yeah. Yes. Is it intended that the report would look at the points of point 2, the effectiveness of the points of point 2?
Would the report look at the points of point 2? My view would be no, but I can ask the mover of the motion. Councillor Nation, do you feel you can answer the question?
Sorry, can you just repeat the question again?
Councillor Isa asked whether the report that would be returning in point 1 would include your points in point 2.
Would include, look, it might reference them, but point 2 is what the organisation is already doing within, and what's within their remit. The report would look at what else do we need to do, what are other opportunities, do we need to contribute or allocate a line item in the budget. So it might reference point 2, but point 2 is what's in point 2. That's already the great work that officers are doing within their own remit, so I wouldn't suggest it is going to impact them in any way. It just might resource the organisation better to look at further projects or to invest more in those projects.
Thank you. Councillor Isa, does that answer your point of clarification?
It does. I'll speak now. I speak now, if that's okay? Look, I fully support what you're putting forward here. I probably have some concerns about the way the motion's worded, because the report that we're getting back is looking at the potential for soft plastic drop-off at council facilities, but we're actually already accepting some soft plastics, and we're already having ongoing discussions about coloured soft plastics. So ideally, from my perspective, I would have, or I just wonder if it wouldn't be more comprehensive if the report is able to tell us how those points in point 2 are going, to give a more fulsome picture of the soft plastic drop-off at our council facilities. It just seems to have separated what we are currently doing, because we're currently doing some things under point 2, but we're going to have a report back on the potential for doing things. So it just sits a bit awkwardly for me, and I'm not quite sure how to make sense of that. And it's wonderful that we are already doing these things under point 2, and I understand the intent of the motion. I think that I understand the intent of the motion is to see what further work we could be doing and how that might need to be funded in the budget. But I'm a bit confused, honestly, by how it's been put to us, because we're already doing things, but we're asking for a report back about some other things. So maybe you might be able to answer some of my concerns in closing, if that's allowed.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? As there has been dissent, I will ask Councillor Nation to close.
Thanks, Mayor. And look, I did circulate this early in the piece to councillors, so I appreciate all those that have spoken in favour. Look, in terms of point 1 and point 2, point 2 is everything that we're already doing within the organisation without any councillor input. That is operational processes, procedures, projects that council has undertaken. Point 1, and particularly that first dot point, the potential for soft plastic drop-off at council facilities. We don't do that. We have soft plastic drop-off at our transfer station, our recycling centre that is only open limited hours and that many of our residents can't actually get to, be it through transport limitations, etc. So that first dot point looks at trying to expand our soft plastic collection at council facilities, much like residents would have been taking them to Coles Keilor East or Woolies Nidri or any other red cycle point throughout our municipality. You can tell I don't go there. So that idea is looking at, well, what are we doing in point 2 and how can we expand it to make it accessible for all residents? Because the reality is that most residents want to do the right thing, but sometimes the right thing can be challenging. And particularly trying to get down to the transfer station in business hours, if you've got 1 or 2 parents in a family working and you physically can't get down there, you don't have the capacity to recycle soft plastics in our city. And we want any scheme that we develop and continue to develop in our municipality to be accessible by as many residents as possible. And so I see that first dot point in going, well, let's try to have a soft plastics collection at East Keilor Leisure Centre, or let's try to have it at the library. Let's try to look at how we can expand it through the municipality.
Time has expired.
That's all right. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 10.2, and I call on Councillor Nation once more to present his notice of motion titled Notice of Motion number 2023/06, closure of Essendon Post Office.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move that Council 1 writes to Australia Post expressing Council's disappointment in the recently announced closure of the Australia Post outlet at 881 Mount Alexander Road, Essendon, and request Australia Post immediately look for a new site to continue post office services for the local community in the 3040 postcodes. And 2, write to the landowner of 881 Mount Alexander Road, recommending they reconsider the termination of the lease of Australia Post and suggest the consideration of a month-to-month tenancy for the post office until development plans on the site are approved or refused and/or a new site is found.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Is there a seconder? Councillor Adams. Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor. Councillors, tonight I'm seeking your support to help save an essential service from leaving the heart of Essendon. About 3 weeks ago, notices were posted up at Essendon Post Office at 881 Mount Alexander Road, advising users that the Essendon Post Office would be closing as of the 24th of March due to an impending development on the site. The notice outlined that Australia Post would not be seeking an alternate site for the Essendon branch. This will mean that from the 24th of March 2023, Moonee Valley's most populous suburb will be without a dedicated post office. This ultimately means that the 20,000 plus residents living in the heart of Essendon now need to trek to smaller Australia Post branches, the Essendon West Post Office or Essendon North Post Office, to access a service they should have on their doorstep. That said, both of these are only licensee franchises. They're already at capacity with their post office boxes, leaving the 500 plus long-term users of the post office boxes in Essendon to have to travel even further to find vacancies. This abandonment of local residents' needs continues a disappointing exodus of essential services from the area. In Essendon alone, we've lost the Commonwealth Bank, Westpac, ANZ, there was even a Bank of Queensland, and a number of other players. We can now add Australia Post to that list. The abandonment of the Essendon area by core service providers like Australia Post, now banking sector, is a slap in the face to the customers who have been regular customers, the individuals and businesses who have been regular customers and their biggest supporters. But all is not lost. Australia Post could do the logical thing and find another short or long-term tenancy. Or they could work with the landowner and continue on a short-term tenancy until development plans for the site are actually finalised. What they shouldn't do is just abandon long-term customers without even looking for a solution. I would hate to think that Australia Post are just using this as a way to cut costs and get out of running a branch that isn't a licensee franchise so they don't have to wear the risk. Surely not. So let's give them the benefit of the doubt and let's give the landowner a chance to step up, find a solution and keep a core service operating right in the heart of Essendon. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Nation, for bringing this motion. The closure of this post office has really caused a lot of distress to residents who have got post office boxes at that location. My understanding from residents that have spoken to me as well is that the Australia Post has basically just put the onus on the person who owns the post office box to try to find another location for their mail, and residents are having to actually go shopping around, I guess, at the post office boxes that are already full, because these, like Councillor Nation was saying, they're licensees, they're not dedicated post office box locations. And you can't actually, so we've got residents that are going around to different locations being told that, you know, there's no availability, and you can't actually do this process online, so it's causing a lot of distress for people. So I think this is worth a shot, and thank you for bringing it up.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Councillor Nation can now take a breath.
I thought I had another one.
As we move on to item 10.3, which is a joint notice of motion from Moonee Ward councillors. And I call on councillors Bedio, Hodgson and Isa to present their notice of motion titled Notice of Motion number 2023/07, major events at Flemington Racecourse and Melbourne Showgrounds, as there can be only one mover of a motion. Councillor Bedio.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that Council resolves to A, write to the Victorian Racing Club, Melbourne Showgrounds, City of Melbourne and other relevant stakeholders to request a joint meeting as soon as possible with all relevant parties to agree on improvements to the consultation and communication of major events with key stakeholders, especially residents impacted by the events at the Flemington Racecourse and Showgrounds, and B, request a report back to Council on the agreed improvements and their implementation.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Bedio.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm pleased that we were able to present this motion in conjunction with my fellow Moonee colleagues who have, over the past couple of years, experienced an increase in the concerns and complaints raised by locals who live around the Flemington Racecourse and Showgrounds precinct. As I just said, we have experienced an increase in legitimate concerns around traffic and parking. Obviously, it's important to acknowledge, and I did have a few comments in relation to this on Facebook the other day. These events and the events that are held at this precinct are important and are valued to our state and city. And I acknowledge to some degree that traffic is part and parcel of living in this area. However, as our population of our state continues to grow and these events will in line continue to grow, the traffic and parking concerns are only going to get worse year on year. The situation's made more difficult as the site itself is actually located within the bounds of the City of Melbourne. So when planning for events or looking at permits and that sort of thing, City of Melbourne are the ultimate responsible authority when it comes to the granting for those events and activities, which makes it harder, especially when you consider that our residents are the residents who are the affected parties surrounding the precinct. What we're calling for as a joint ward is that we seek to have an immediate meeting with the Victorian Racing Club and the Melbourne Showgrounds and the City of Melbourne and any relevant stakeholders to look at ways that we can improve the consultation as well as communication to our impacted residents. Now, we don't want to see, I know personally I don't want to see these events cease, and I'm sure that's not going to happen. And, you know, I want to see these events continue to run successfully. However, we do need to seek a resolution as to how we can improve the communication and traffic management. I'm not sure how it will look. However, we need to have a meeting with the relevant stakeholders so that we could put something together so that we can have a path forward. We've also put here that a report be provided back to council on what the agreed improvements are that have come out of this meeting, so that'll come back to us for endorsement should this motion be supported by my colleagues. So thanks again to my fellow councillors in the Moonee ward who worked really hard to put this together, and as well for the last couple of years of working with residents, usually on weekends as well, walking down, seeing what's happening down in the showgrounds. I know I've been there a number of times, especially when the big events like the caravan and camping shows are on, exams and the like, and also to our residents who have contacted us and worked with us over the last few years. I know it has been difficult at times, but hopefully we can move to find a solution that will at least find some reprieve and make the situation a little bit better.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Bedio, and thanks, Councillor Isa, as well, for working on this motion. Look, we probably had a reasonably quiet first year of this council term as COVID restrictions were, being eased, and public events held at the showgrounds and race club had either lower attendance or were less frequent. But it's really ramped up in the last 18 months, and I think exacerbated in a post-COVID world with more people reluctant to catch public transport to these events, so more people driving. And our residents are really experiencing the impact of, illegal parking and some of the traffic congestion that is created by the volume of people driving to these events. I second Councillor Bedio's sentiments. We're not trying to, put any kibosh on those events being held. They bring vibrancy to the community. But I think there are a couple of consultative committees or steering committees that used to meet in a pre-COVID world that don't meet anymore. And really the intention of this is to speak to the event holders and to the City of Melbourne and to residents, and make sure that we can all get together and work on how to best address some of the issues that have come up, some that are existing, some that are new, and make sure that we're working to resolve them so that we can still see these events being held, but minimise the impact, the negative impact that they have on the people living around. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Would any other councillor like to speak? Surprise, surprise, our third Moonee councillor, Councillor Isa.
Thanks. I'll try not to repeat the comments made by my colleagues who've spoken so well on the issue. But Councillor Hodgson's absolutely right. We didn't have these experiences during 2021 and perhaps fewer in 2022, although increasing. And in the resumption of events, which we're all really pleased to see, it's fantastic to have those huge events happening again. We've also seen our residents' patience really sorely tested. And we think that one of the reasons, or the repeated concern that keeps being expressed by many residents, is that those consultative committees that seem to exist historically just haven't been resumed with events coming back. And it's not quite clear why that's the case. We have tried to reach out to City of Melbourne to try to get a feeling for what's their management practices are around the events, but we've reached a point where we really need to bring all parties together and come up with a clear action plan. And so that's the impetus behind this notice of motion, that we need to get the VRC, the showgrounds, City of Melbourne and City of Moonee Valley together to come up with a plan that can adequately address the concerns that we hear every time there is an event on. And the repetition of the concerns is really quite frustrating because they're not things that are new each time. It's the same concerns over and over again, and they are around the drop-off point. There doesn't seem to be a safe or clearly defined Uber or taxi drop-off point such that cars just stop on Epsom Road and clog up traffic. There don't seem to be any bike racks at the showgrounds. I'm not quite sure about the racecourse, but when we're trying to get people onto sustainable transport, we're trying to get cars off the road, to have no bike racks there just seems ludicrous. There don't seem to be measures to get people onto public transport, and we had that issue come to the Chamber for the showgrounds last year. And we have, although there are some plans for Wisewald, Sandown, Ascot and Duncan streets, and those plans were put in place by the previous council in 2019, they don't quite seem to be working such that residents don't know when their roads are going to be closed, they don't know who's managing the traffic, they don't know who to contact when there are problems. So we really need to have better consultation with stakeholders, and we need better communication with residents. When are the major events? What's the traffic management? And who do they contact when it's not going to work? So there's your action plan, stakeholders. Anyway, we're interested in the report coming back to us that outlines all of these issues and the solutions. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? As there's been consensus amongst speakers, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Item 10.4, I call on Councillor Sypek to present his first notice of motion, titled Notice of Motion number 2023/08 Moonee Valley Festival.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Take notice that at the meeting of Council, it is my intention to move that Council resolve to request the Chief Executive Officer to present a report to Council by May 2023 that considers the option of returning the Moonee Valley Festival into an annual event program. This report should consider the most suitable location, timing, allocation of resources, including options of returning the festival to Queen's Park.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Is there a seconder? Councillor Isa. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak to your notice of motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Let me first start by asking for an extension, and secondly...
I'll consider it, thank you.
Whichever... is that considered or not? Or?
I'll consider it.
Okay, thank you.
Please continue.
One of the most common themes and words I've heard in every ward that I've been to over the last 5 years is, John, bring back the Moonee Valley Festival. I have heard that so many times. Now, let me take you back in history, 1977, when Susie Quattro was belting out down the Devilgate Drive and KISS were holding their biggest festival at Waverley Park in their platform shoes. And that was the really, really exciting event. And you know what was the biggest thing that was happening in Moonee Valley? The 59 tram driving through to Airport West. That was the most exciting thing in 1977. But there was a young Italian boy that came to this Moonee Valley Council, all on his own, wearing his platform shoes and flares, and I think the man is here with us tonight, Mr Frank de Blasi, former Citizen of the Year. He came in here and asked the Moonee Valley Council, can we have a festival? And you know what happened after that, Mr Mayor? The festival went for 41 years. 41 years. And I know people were saying it was old and stale and it was getting... But you know what? People just liked it. It was good. It was something that people wanted to come to. Now, we stopped this 5 years ago when we changed the whole program, and the whole idea of it is that it costed too much. And it only costed $211,000 to stage this. $211,000. Now, let me read a few more items. In 17-18 was the last time we had it, 217,000. 18-19, we jumped to 631,000. Now, how is 211,000, out of the ballpark, but this one is 600, no problems. Then the following year, 436. Then when COVID came, it was 45,000, we all understand that. 2021, 377,000. And this past year, 825,000 compared to 211. Now, this is a festival that I think we really should consider bringing it back here. And with Mr. Frank de Blasi here, I can tell you that he speaks for quite a number of people in the community. And just by his presence here is telling us that the community wants it back. I strongly urge my colleagues to consider bring back the Moonee Valley Festival.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak?
Thanks, Mayor and Councillor Sypek. Thank you so much for bringing this to Council. It's something that it's something that has been raised with me a number of times as well, and I'm glad you've brought it. I loved the Moonee Valley Festival. So did my kids. In fact, I think I remember one of my kids crying when it was cancelled, not to embarrass them too much by that. The Moonee Valley Festival didn't even run at much of a loss. It didn't cost us that much money. It was a time when all community groups could set up marquees and people could come and find out about hundreds of different activities within Moonee Valley. Kids' dance groups and music groups all performed on the stages. One of the concerns during the drought was the health of the trees, but that was possibly a manageable issue and something that is perhaps not as much of a concern at the moment in these wet times. Look, sadly, residents were never actually asked whether they wanted the festival to be cancelled or changed. And to me, that was one of the things that was most disappointing about the decision to change things up. I was actually on a portfolio advisory committee at the time, and the report that came to council said that we'd been consulted about the Moonee Valley Festival, and we hadn't. We hadn't been consulted, and I was so angry that the report to council said we had that I quit the committee in frustration. Look, I love Illuminate, the Illuminate Festival. That's a great concept, and obviously we had some disappointments last year, and I do hope that that comes back. But it's a different festival. It's not the same focus as the Moonee Valley Festival. Illuminate has sort of become a music concert, which is fantastic, and I hope that we try that again and keep that going with that focus. Music and lights, brilliant. The Moonee Valley Festival is different. And I really want to get this report back and see what we can do about reviving that. I'm really glad to see you here tonight, Frank. Thank you so much for coming along. And I'm 100% behind this motion. Thank you very much, Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Would any other councillor like to speak to this notice of motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Look, just to echo the sentiments and to add that I too hear about this fairly frequently. And, I live in reasonably close proximity to Queen's Park, and it used to be the case that I would say, the only time I struggle to find a park out front of my house is Cox Plate Day and Moonee Valley Festival Day. So it was always a very well attended and well loved event. And I'm all for looking at options to see if we can bring it back to the municipality. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Would any other councillor like to speak? If not, Councillor Byrne.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Sypek, and thank you, Frank, for joining us tonight. I had to, when this motion came through, I had to go back and look at some old papers and sort of jog my memory in terms of where it was and what happened. And you're right, you've crunched your numbers well. We spent about $723,000 on festivals that year, and 211 was on the Moonee Valley Festival, and that was deemed to be a lot of money. And I think one of the reasons was because 543 of the 723 was in Moonee Ponds. And there was a lot of thought at the time that that is a lot of money to be spending in one neighbourhood within the whole of Moonee Valley. So the idea from the officers was, let's take out probably the main one that people know and love, and we can separate it into others. And I know you were mayor at the time, I was deputy mayor at the time. It was something that was actually voted on unanimously by all councillors that were in the chamber that night. I will note that Councillor Andrew Serace and Nicole Marshall weren't in the chamber, but everyone agreed because, well, for instance, Rosehill Ward, of the 723,000, only got $50,000 worth of festivals. So spending all the money in one area, yes, it's good for people who want to travel, but the idea of spreading out was also thought to be somewhat of an idea. I do agree that there should have been more consultation. I think this council has learnt so much since 2018 on consultation. There's no way in the world we would be doing something like this without going out to consultation anymore. But I think that you're right, Councillor Sypek, that we've tried to do various things in the events and festivals space, and the community have felt let down. And we can use the Centreway example on Saturday night, and I put something up on social media. I know that you were there, and Councillor Tyson, you were there. Actually, there was a lot of councillors there, but and I'm sure you've heard feedback as well. It was really disappointing. It was really sad. There wasn't a lot of money invested into it, and the Mediterranean Fiesta used to be a highlight for the Centreway. There is no reason, I'm not saying that the Mediterranean Fiesta couldn't be reimagined, but the Centreway is made for beautiful festivals, and I'm completely supportive of this motion, but I'm also completely supportive of going in and batting for our ward and making sure that we get adequate festivals across the municipality as well. I would like to see smiles on people's faces when they go out and we see places activated, particularly post-COVID, when people want to be out and about doing community things, trying taekwondo from the local taekwondo place, or dance groups from wherever, and the local eateries. That's what we're about at council, bringing all of these together, and the Moonee Valley Festival did this well. Aberfeldy only had $26,000 worth of festivals. And at the time, the thought was, well, it doesn't...
Councillor Byrne, your
Could
time
I please
has
have a 30-second extension?
15 seconds.
You give everyone else 30.
There have been no time extensions tonight.
Okay.
Councillor Byrne.
The idea was moving it down the road 500 a kilometre or so. It wouldn't actually matter that much, and that it was effectively would be moving the festival down. But we've had a rotten run of weather. Illuminate hasn't caught on, and obviously that has transformed more into a music festival as well, more so than what the community idea was anyway. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Would any other councillors like to speak? Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor. I kind of disagree that it's this is about ward equality. I think the Moonee Valley Festival is an annual event, was an annual event that was attended by a lot of Moonee Valley residents, but also people far and wide. I know people that would come, from Brimbank and Hume and Maribyrnong to that festival. It was sort of just a known event every year that happened in March. Was it March or February? I can't remember about that. And I think that the local events haven't sort of been, or the Summer in the Valley sort of events haven't sort of attracted that sort of far and wide residents, because it's not, they're sort of, well, I think that they're still fairly new, so they haven't sort of developed much of a following, but also they're very localised, and if you don't sort of live in the area that it's in, you kind of don't really know it's on. Whereas I feel like the Queen's Park Festival, it was just an annual Moonee Valley event that everybody knew about and everybody attended from everywhere. So I really support this, and thank you, Councillor Sypek, for bringing it.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'm happy to support this motion. However, I do concur with some of my colleagues, in particular Councillor Byrne, in saying that activating the whole of the municipality is really important, not only for the sake of sharing across wards, but for the sake of sharing across demographics. I mean, I, for one, I'm a partner. I live in a house with my partner. I don't have kids. I do get a little bit sick of seeing every festival with free face painting and preps performing. And look, I know that's great for families, but as someone, wants something a little bit more vibrant, I was really excited to see Illuminate the River come forward, and that's something that I would tell my friends to come to Moonee Valley and come and watch, and we can enjoy a night out together in my city. And that doesn't happen often because most of the events that we have are focused towards families, but we have a lot more than just families living in Moonee Valley. My concern with the Moonee Valley Festival, from memory, I know it hasn't been on for a while, was it was very much a family-focused event, and I get that that's something that we need to provide for. But I do see a lot of value in how we've broken up the events recently so that we can deliver for a wide demographic of constituents, because we are a very diverse city in Moonee Valley, and I want to see us continue to do that. I will support this motion because I want to see what the report says, and potentially with community consultation. And I know as well, I've had a lot of people come to me and ask when we're going to be bringing back the Moonee Valley Festival. So I'm happy to see a report come back and see what its findings say. But I am also supportive of making sure we have a wide variety of events, and I think our team have done a really good job of late, in particular activating the Clock Tower Centre with a lot of live music. Obviously all the hard work that went into Illuminate, unfortunately it didn't eventuate the way we'd planned, but I would really hope to see that come back this year. And most importantly, we are still waiting for our arts and culture plan to come back, and I think that is a really important body of work that we've had a lot invested into and a lot of consultation, and I believe that will probably help lead the way into how we focus our events. And potentially, Councillor Sypek, this report might in some way complement the arts and culture plan, but I would like to see us have some marrying between those documents. I really don't like us having notice of motions where we request things that don't align with other things that we have in the works that are sort of linked, so I kind of really want to see us working together. So I hope officers can do that. Otherwise, I'm happy to support. I appreciate this coming to council, and we'll, if it gets through, I'll look forward to reading the report.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I will agree that I think every week or month I'll get someone asking when's the Moonee Valley Festival coming back. It's mainly just former councillor Andrea Serace just commenting on my Instagram posts over and over again. And I do say that in jest, but Councillor Serace was a massive advocate of us doing events for our community, and the Moonee Valley Festival is one of those. And I think, and I thank Councillor Byrne for the little history lesson, because 5 years is a long time on council, and you kind of forget what the debate was at the time. And I think that was the discussion, that we needed to not be so centralised in Moonee Ponds, and maybe the Moonee Valley Festival was a little bit tired and dated, but we've tried to do the satellite events, and they probably haven't turned out the way that was envisaged at the time that a decision was made for us to abandon the Moonee Valley Festival. And probably COVID has changed people's perspective as well as what they like to attend and what they value. And I think the interactions that are had at the Moonee Valley Festival with community groups, with local non-profits, etc., are actually something that we probably value even more now after COVID, because we appreciate the role that those groups or organisations play in our community. I think we also just have to be, we have to note that Illuminate this year was a really big event, but we did have a very generous cash injection by the state government, and it is not always going to be the case that we have a partner in that can fund a great deal of what we do. So if that money doesn't come in following years, or if the Live Music Australia, whatever that grant stream is, dries up, is the sort of spend on Illuminate something that we want to do, or is the actual 200,000 that it cost us to do the Moonee Valley Festival, is that a better bang for our buck? I don't want to take away the work that our events team has done over the past 4 or 5 years. We gave them the direction unanimously to not continue with the Moonee Valley Festival, and they rolled out what the way we wanted to go. They did fantastic with Illuminate the River this year, with the organisation, with the bill, and it's just a disappointment that it didn't see or come to full fruition. Finally, I just think we also need to note that we are quite restrictive in organisations, be it businesses or clubs or community groups, that want to hold events on council land. So I'm sure with the Centreway Festival, if you said to Liz, hey, you can have Centreway for a massive event in an afternoon, you run it, not us, she might jump it. She might not, but she might jump at it. Can I have 15 seconds?
Councillor Nation, you can have 15 seconds.
She might jump at the opportunity. And so we are really restrictive in what events private entities, be it clubs, community organisations or individuals can hold on public land. We need to be broader. I would like to say I'm spoken not in favour of this because I want to hear Councillor Sypek speak again.
Councillor Nation.
Thank you.
Councillor Sharp, you're the only councillor who has not spoken on this motion. Would you like to speak? You don't have to.
I concur with all councillors' comments and happy to support.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. As there has been some nuance in debate, Councillor Sypek, would you like to close?
Thank you, and thank you to my esteemed colleague, Councillor Nation, for giving me the opportunity to speak again. Look, no one can accuse Moonee Valley of not trying to do something different. We can't be accused of that. We've tried. It sort of hasn't worked the way we think, and we're getting community ground swell. It is swelling. Bring back the Moonee Valley Festival. I agree with Councillor Bedio that we should have diversity. There's nothing stopping us having the festival during the day and then have a little, cut 2 or 3 hours break and then illuminate the river at night. I mean, how good, jam-packed would that be and how good would that be so we have diversity through the whole place? Look, it's a thought, right? But this is what this report's going to bring back. So, once again, I just want to thank the gentleman here, Mr. Frank de Blasi, who actually brought this whole Moonee Valley Festival up in 1977, and I consider him the godfather of the Moonee Valley Festival. And thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. I'll now put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Item 10.5. I now call on Councillor Byrne to present her notice of motion titled Notice of Motion number 2023/09 Valley Lake Trees.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move that Council resolves to request the Chief Executive Officer to investigate and provide a report back to Council on the health and condition of the street trees within Granite Way, Basalt Avenue, the Avenue, Olivine Road and Steel Creek Drive, including the creek side directly adjacent to the road in the Valley Lake Estate, East Keilor, in response to a recent pest infection reported by residents. The report should also include options for management of the infestation as well as the suitability of eucalyptus scoparia trees for street plantings.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Can I just clarify with you in the first sentence, the fourth last word, whether that's infection or infestation?
On the fourth line.
The fourth last word in the first sentence. Recent pest infestation or infection?
Infestation.
Infestation, thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sypek. Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak to your notice of motion?
Thank you, I will. And this was another one that probably hasn't been going on for 5 years like the Moonee Valley Festival, but it's definitely been going on for probably a good 12 to 24 months around Valley Lake, and that's some of the issues with the trees. Individually, people have reached out to council to have the arborist out to have a look at the trees, and what we have heard from the residents that has come back is that there is an issue with the trees. There's a lot of trees and there's not necessarily a plan in place. Or it might be something that goes away. But in the meantime, this problem may be growing from what the residents seem to be reporting, and it's getting people really, really upset. And I can't emphasise that enough in the chamber, how upset it's causing people to sell their houses and to move out of our area because they think council is doing nothing to help the health and viability of these trees. There is no way, I've spoken in this chamber many times about how much I love trees, and I've actually not supported a motion before about cutting down particular trees in Essendon. And this motion isn't necessarily about cutting down trees, it's about getting a report back and finding out what's wrong and what we can do about it. It might be something that ends up being an opt-in system in terms of if people are particularly having a problem with 1, 2 or 3 trees, that they come out and maybe 6 get replanted. I don't know what it will come back with, but I think that we as a council and ward councils, I know we've spoken about this, we sort of have to do something because people are really stressed about it. There's been 2 things that I've had sort of blow up on social media the past couple of weeks. One is the lack of communication around the Centreway Festival, and the other is the trees in Valley Lake. So I'm glad that there's been 2 motions, one in regards to festivals and one in regards to trees, and hopefully we get some good outcomes, because at the end of the day we're community representatives, and I don't know if we'd be doing our job if we weren't bringing these sort of things to the chamber. So hopefully people can see the merit of this notice of motion, and why I think that we just need to make sure we live in a lovely area where people can love their hopefully healthy trees. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I'm fully supportive of this notice of motion. In Moonee Valley, we sort of have a mixture of trees, and the one that I always get really concerns me is Steeles Creek and the riparian zone through the river. We've got to really protect this area here, and if we have trees that are sort of classified as weeds or classified as non-native, they do cause a problem. But not only there are also some native trees that cause problems with their disease, and we have to look at it and get an arborist report and to attend to it in the best way we can. So I'm more than happy to support this notice of motion. Once again, it'll be a report, and it'll be come back to the chambers, and we will be able to have further information and debate it further. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? If not, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. And now I call on Councillor Sypek to present his second notice of motion, titled Notice of Motion number 2023/10, State Government's Curbside Recycling Reforms.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Take notice that at the meeting of Council, it is my intention to move that Council resolve to request the Chief Executive Officer to present a report to Council by May the 2023 that considers the option and impacts of implementing the State Government's curbside recycling reform. The report should consider the most suitable service options and benefits, benchmarking other Council experiences, timing and allocation of resources, including the option of maintaining our current curbside collection frequency. Sorry, I put one extra word in there, our.
That's all right. Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Governance has picked that up. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The second most words I hear, besides the Moonee Valley Festival, is keep our bin collection as it is. Don't change anything. It works. Now, I'm more than happy to look at the state government's reforms of, maybe bringing in a 4th bin and having a glass collection. No problems with that. But when I first got on council in 2004, the biggest thing back then was the green waste bin, and they ordered these aerating green waste bins that were going to be the future of green waste, and they would only be collected once a month, because what would happen is, because of the aeration system, the green waste would collapse and condense down. Didn't work. And right now, especially up in Rosehill, we have a lot of avid gardeners up there, and they do have a lot of green waste, whether it's summer, winter, autumn or spring. And not only just up there, but I think through the whole municipality. If you remember, a couple of months ago, I brought another notice of motion to bring in a smaller green waste bin, the 120, to allow people in smaller houses and smaller units who don't require a big green bin. And that's actually coming out now, and it's working quite well. But my biggest concern is the landfill, and I think Moonee Valley has got our rubbish collection perfect right now. Everyone's got a 120 landfill bin, and they've got a bigger recycle bin, and they've got a 240 green waste bin. And it gets collected, the red gets collected once a week, and the recycle and the green are on alternative weeks. And it works. And I don't hear any complaints about, oh, we need more frequency. What I hear is, don't touch it, it's working. It works perfect right now. So I just want to get a report back just to make sure that we're not going to go down the path of other councils where they've actually changed the landfill bin to once a fortnight, and there was a revolt, an absolute revolt, and they had to reverse their decision. They had to rescind it. I don't want to do that. I think we're happy. I don't think any of us are getting reports or getting phone calls about, the frequency is not enough. The frequencies, I reckon, is just perfect right now.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Sypek. Look, I'm really happy to support this motion because I think that we need to be getting all the information that we want. This is a really big behaviour change piece in terms of trying to reduce the amount of organics that is going into our landfill, which is creating a large carbon emission impact for our community. A big part of, the move statewide to try and encourage people to use the green waste bin for their household organics is to combat that issue. And look, ultimately, I hope that we're moving down a path to where it will only be necessary to collect the landfill bin once a fortnight, because all of the stinky waste that makes it necessary for us to collect the landfill once a week that's the organics. That's the organics rotting in your landfill bin. And we want to encourage people to be using their green organic waste bin for all that rubbish. And then they should have landfill bins that have less in them and only need to be collected fortnightly. And all of that stinky waste will have to be picked up weekly out of the green bins. But I agree with you, Councillor Sypek, that there's been a couple of councils that have gone before us and haven't had very good experiences. One of the last municipal waste forums that I attended as a council delegate was a big discussion on some of the lessons learned from some of the councils that had tried it recently. And we have a lot that we can pick up from those experiences and make sure that when we roll out a behaviour change program, that our residents have enough information to feel comfortable with it and that we don't get the kind of backlash that you're talking about. So really happy to see this come. Glad that it's happening this year. I know that our officers have been working really hard for a number of years now and making sure that we're getting this right. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Isa.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Sypek, for bringing this motion. Just wanted to reiterate Councillor Hodgson's comments about the transformative time that we're in at the moment with respect to waste. And the state government curbside reforms are obviously putting some pressure on councils to deliver those different options for people, but it's necessary. And it's necessary because we are trying to minimise waste and to reduce landfill and to increase the circular economy in much of the same way that Councillor Nation's motion earlier this evening was pointing us towards. So at the moment we've been focused on FOGO. We've been focused on collecting data about how we can better get organic waste out of landfill into our green bins. And with the challenges that are going to come to us in the coming months are around what to do about glass and the purple bins, and how do we roll out those bins along with our FOGO bins. How do we cope with people having 4 bins? How do we cope with the collections and the storage of those bins, and how do we then manage the logistics of the weekly collections? Many other councils have experienced this and we can learn from their experiences. These are big challenges though. I don't want to lose sight of what we are really trying to do, which is reduce our waste. one of the things that is known, and again I'm harking back a little bit to Councillor Nation's motion around soft plastics, one of the things we know is that the more people recycle soft plastics, then the more they put their organic food into compost and landfill. So there are some really complex behavioural lessons that we can integrate into the bins. That's the end point. There's a whole lot of other stuff that goes on. It's about talking with businesses, manufacturers. It's a much bigger picture than just what's collected each week. And I'm really looking forward to this report coming back that perhaps helps to expand that from this question of which colour bin do I put out to how do we have our war on waste in Moonee Valley? How do we play our part in that? How do we encourage people to take containers to the supermarkets or to bulk food shops to markets? It's a really big question. It's a behavioural question, logistics question and a cost question. So I look forward to the report coming back. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Would any other Councillor Bedio?
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Sypek, for bringing this forward. And I concur with my colleagues. There is some real need for transformative work to be done, namely the single-use plastic ban that's being introduced throughout Victoria is one of them, and that's something that's going to be rolling out slowly. So we've had the single-use plastic bag ban. Now we're moving to not being able to use single-use disposable plastic cutlery and the like. However, you still go down to Woolworths and you can buy bananas wrapped in shrink wrap for some reason. And it's things like that make it harder for us to reduce our landfill. I concur with Councillor Hodgson that at some point we do need to potentially look to reduce our landfill. I know that's our pickups. I know that's something that people don't like to hear. However, we really don't have an option in the long term. We need to reduce our landfill and we need to increase our recycling. I have concerns about how that's going to roll out, in particular with apartments. So as someone who lived in an apartment for a long time, I'm used to bin chutes, and we only have two options in a bin chute. We have rubbish and we have recycling. So when we're looking at introductions of the fourth bin, and that's probably something that we need to look at with this report, is how's that going to roll out for businesses, but then also for apartment complexes. Now, a lot of our apartment complexes obviously don't have council bins. They have bins through private collection. And they're usually under a waste management plan for their planning permit. It would be interesting to see how that will impact, because notably, in Moonee Ponds and our ward in particular, more and more residents are moving into multi-dwelling apartments. So the purple bin might not come into play, but how can we make sure that those users still have access or still have somewhere to deposit their bottles? That would be something that I'd really like to see in the report, and potentially how we're going to look at potentially addressing the planning scheme or our planning scheme with waste management to ensure that developments in the future align with our waste reduction goals. I think that's something that we should be looking at doing in the short term, because as we know, planning amendments can take a significant amount of time. That's all from me. Happy to support this motion. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Adams.
I don't have much further to add. I've really enjoyed the discussion from all the councillors, actually. And I agree with Councillor Bedio. I think that we need to, if there's something that we can do in our planning scheme and in our planning permits or building permits for apartment complexes to have waste rooms that are bigger to accommodate, separation of the different disposables. That would go a long way, because I know a lot of buildings that have already been built are actually not equipped to be able to separate, the different sorts of waste. So, if there's something that we can sort of do in our planning scheme for future developments, I think that will be really encouraged. And I'm really encouraged by all councillors for the support that there is to reduce waste. And I think we're really at a crisis point and we need to do something now. And I'm really excited that these discussions are happening. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I think one of the challenges with the 4-bin system is it is a little bit of one size fits all. And the reality is throughout a municipality there are an extremely broad number of household setups and sorts of dwellings, and just having 4 bins, all similar sizes for each property, and a collection that goes past every property either once a week or twice a week. That's one of the issues with our waste collection. It's not just for us to look at, say, collecting green waste each week, and in the current survey as part of the FOGO and the organic waste consultation, there's a question in it which is, do you want green bin every 2 weeks and landfill every 1 week, or do you want landfill every 2 weeks and green waste every 1 week? So they're the 2 options that are presented. Green waste 2, landfill 1, or landfill 2, green waste 1. The challenge is that not everyone is filling up their bins. As I said, the truck is still going around to every house, whether it picks up a bin or not, and in turn that creates carbon emissions. There ultimately has to be a smarter way that we do waste in the future. Now, it mightn't be an on-demand hard waste, green waste recycling, but the idea that a truck travels around everywhere and collects once or twice a week is not an efficient way of doing waste. I think at this point in time, we're not ready to go to a fortnightly landfill. So, look, I think that's a very valid point in Councillor Sypek's motion. I probably am undecided, so I'd be interested to hear what he says in closing, because I'm still definitely not in support of this yet until I hear him comment in closing. So, convince me in your closing argument, Councillor Sypek, if you get entitled to one.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Sypek, would you like to close?
Thanks for the challenge, Councillor Nation, and I'm going to give you a great explanation. Some of our colleague councils who went to a fortnightly landfill, do you know what happened to them? What the reason why they've changed their mind is because their landfill rubbish increased. It didn't decrease, it increased when it went to fortnightly. And you know the reason why? It's called contamination. What happened is the residents filled up their red bins and they had nowhere else to put their rubbish. So what did they do? They put it into the green waste and they put it into the yellow waste. And you know what happens when you contaminate those 2 bins? They go to landfill. And I'm going to make a prediction here. If we do go fortnightly, you want to go landfill, we're going to be increasing our landfill, just like all the other councils. So I strongly urge you to support this notice of motion, and hopefully the report comes back that we keep the red landfill bin once a week and the other 2 on alternative weeks. It is working right now. It is what the community wants. There is no angst right now. Let's not fix something that's not broken.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. We now move on to item 11, urgent business. Councillors, do we have any urgent business? Councillor Isa.
Mayor, I'd like to move that Council admits submission to Maribyrnong River flood review as urgent business as it complies with our urgent business governance rule 25.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. And before I consider a seconder, does any councillor have a conflict of interest? No? Do I have a seconder that submission to Maribyrnong River flood review be admitted as urgent business? Councillor Sypek. Councillor Isa, would you like to add any words as to why this matter should be considered urgent?
So this matter has arisen since last Tuesday's briefing through a number of media articles on the review that have appeared and are of relevance to Moonee Valley. There was also a session on Saturday with Melbourne Water that helped clarify the review process and what sort of submission Moonee Valley might make to the review. In terms of it needing to be moved tonight, the matter needs to be brought to give officers sufficient time to put together a report ahead of the closing date for the submissions on 17th of March.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak to why this motion should be considered urgent?
I think Councillor Isa actually spelt it out quite clearly.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would any other councillors like to speak as to why this be considered urgent? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Councillor Isa, now that your matter's been accepted as an item of urgent business, I'll ask you to move your motion in relation to submission to Maribyrnong River flood review.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move that Council requests the Chief Executive Officer to prepare a submission on behalf of Moonee Valley City Council to the Maribyrnong River Flood Event Independent Review being conducted under the auspices of Melbourne Water, and to present this to Council at the meeting of 14th of March 2023, in brackets prior to the closing date for submissions on 17th of March 2023, close brackets. The submission should highlight issues and principles related to matters such as, but not limited to, bullet point 1, the general effects of the flood event on Moonee Valley. Bullet point 2, the general impact of the flood event compared with predictions and modelling previously provided to Council. Bullet point 3, Council's position on the Flemington Racecourse flood wall. Bullet point 4, general comments on Melbourne Water's approach to flood modelling and prediction from the point of view of local government. And bullet point 5, clarifying Council's role in and perspective on flood modelling and predictions related to 9 Canning Street, Avondale Heights.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. And can I get a general acknowledgement from councillors that they're aware of what's been moved? Thank you. Councillors, do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Sypek again. Thank you. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to your urgent motion?
On Friday the 14th of October 2022, dozens of Moonee Valley residents were taken by surprise when water poured through their houses, destroying their homes. Residents from Wood Street, Ascot Vale and from the Riverview Retirement Village are still living in rentals or couch surfing, unsure of when they'll be able to return home. I listened to some of their stories at the session on Saturday. One older gentleman said it was the first time in his married life that he'd ever been homeless. Another spoke about the $5,000 worth of tools that were looted from his shed before Christmas as his property remained empty. I thank the people who were present with Melbourne Water on Saturday, who very sensitively collected these stories from affected residents. The review currently being undertaken is an opportunity for anyone impacted by the flood event to submit their stories to help inform solutions and better flood management. Moonee Valley Council, I believe, should also take up this opportunity to put our story on record and our position of what needs to be done differently. The floodplains of Fairbairn Park and Aberfeldy did their job well, and I want to thank again the dozens of community members who helped us clean up these floodplains in the weeks following. But there were things that did not go to plan, and we need to put our case forward to call for any changes that will protect residents from future events. We're no longer operating in a 1 in 100-year flood environment. This is the change of climate in a very real sense. Modelling, predictions, planning and emergency management all need to take into account a new reality. And from a local government perspective, we need the experts to give us advice and predictions that are sound. We rely on their expertise, and our residents rely on us to put this case forward. So I look forward to reading a submission, should my colleagues agree with me. I look forward to reading a submission that our officers put forward for this review. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. And I know I sort of harp on history a little bit, but let me take you back to 1987. That was 1897, my apologies. That was the first time when they started recording the levels of the Maribyrnong River. And you know how many times the Maribyrnong River has flooded since then, till now? And they always say, like Councillor Isa said, it's like a 1 in 100-year event. Well, it isn't. It's actually flooded 13 times over those years. So that's basically once every 10 years. And if it goes to what they're saying, we could be up for another one in the next 10 years or so. I remember a couple of years back, they were talking about, how to stop the river from flooding all the time. And they talked about damming up near Taylor's Lakes, near the airport, where the organ pipes are. And there's a huge crevice there that could have, stopped that. Imagine if we had that dam, probably wouldn't have had as much damage as we had now. But look, it's a thought. It was, at the time, it was rejected. But now this could be an option that it might work this time. But I too am concerned about the Flemington Wall, because the Flemington racetrack is actually a floodplain. It's actually where the natural water should flow. And what's happened, we've built a wall there, and the other side of the river has gotten all the damage. But look, it is what it is now, and I think we just need to look forward, to look at options to see what is the best way forward, what is the best way to mitigate any more risk, any more damage. I think there's lessons to be learned here. And I thank you, Councillor Isa, for bringing this urgent business. I think it's very, very valid, and I think we as a council should fully back this.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Isa. Look, just only to say that we learnt a lot very quickly in the days and weeks following the flood, and I think it's really important that we're able to make a submission to the independent review to share all of the stories that were shared with us that might not be, make it to the review otherwise through independent submissions. It's really important that we use that information that was shared with us and that we garnered through the outpouring of support from our community to try and clean up the floods to good use. So happy to support this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. I think I saw Councillor Burns' hand. Would you like to speak?
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to ask a point of clarification through you, probably directed to the CEO, but you can decide. Just in regards to the point, Council's position on the Flemington Racecourse flood wall, how that will be interpreted, whether that's Council's position, what our existing position was when we originally objected, or whether we think it should be taken down now, how that will be interpreted. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. I'll just take a minute to consider your point of clarification. My interpretation would be Council's current position on the Flemington flood wall, but I might ask our CEO whether she feels in a position to respond.
My initial thoughts were if Council had a position at the time. That's my initial thoughts. I saw Councillor Isa is nodding. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, CEO.
Sorry, what was that? I couldn't hear.
CEO's position is that it would consider the historical position. Yeah. Would you like to speak to the motion? Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Would any other councillor like to speak? No? If not, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Is there any other urgent business? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. I have an item of urgent business.
Thank you. I'll ask you to present your motion to consider as urgent business.
Thank you. The motion reads, Council admits consultation with the community as urgent business as it complies with our urgent business governance rule 25.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Does any councillor have a conflict of interest in this matter? No? Councillors, do I have a seconder that Councillor Sharp's motion be admitted as urgent business. Councillor Sypek. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak to as to why this matter should be considered urgent?
Thank you, Mayor. The matter should be admitted as urgent business as it relates to a matter which has arisen only since the distribution of the agenda and is confined to a matter that cannot be safely or conveniently be deferred until the next council meeting, as the process of consultation is beginning next week, and also it cannot be addressed through an operational service request as it relates to consultation which is beginning.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak as to why this matter be considered urgent?
Yes, look, I totally agree. As we're sort of going out to partial consultation, this is more of an expanded consultation in the area.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would any other councillor like to speak as to why this be considered urgent? Councillor Isa?
Could I just ask a point of clarification, Mayor? I'm not quite sure to whom. The installation of the synthetic pitch, is that, when was that intended to occur? What was the time frame that it was intended that consultation occur?
Mayor, my motion hasn't been raised yet.
Well, sorry, I guess I'm trying to understand the urgency of it, because if it's not intended to occur for quite some time, I'm just querying the urgency of it, that's all.
I will allow it. Councillor Sharp, do you feel in a position to comment, or whether you would like me to ask the CEO on that as it relates to urgency?
The urgency is around consultation on matters at this location. It's not the issue is surrounding, and the matter is urgent because it relates to consultation which is occurring next week. As Councillor Sypek mentioned, it's an expanded consultation. The urgency is there because it is starting next week.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Isa, does that answer your point of clarification?
Am I allowed to speak to this motion?
You are.
Perhaps I'll just speak.
Please.
So I guess I'm querying whether consultation on the synthetic pitch is urgent, and whether it needs to be wrapped up in this consultation of the lighting. The information that I'm looking at in an email that was forwarded this evening seems to me to suggest that I'm just trying to read it really quickly, I apologise if I make any mistakes, that the consultation for the synthetic pitch was to be, or is intended to be, part of a master planning process. So I was just trying to get a timeline around that, because if we need a master planning process to properly consult with the community around synthetic pitch, it just seems to perhaps cut across an urgency to go out and ask people about it next week if we haven't actually undertaken the step of the master planning to understand whether the synthetic pitch is what people, is part of this bigger vision for the JHL and reserve. So I guess I don't feel as though we've addressed the threshold questions around the synthetic pitch to rush off and urgently then undertake consultation next week. It seems to me that the soccer strategy sets out a different process, but if I've misunderstood that in my quick read of this email, I do apologise. I'm not comfortable with consulting on the synthetic pitch at this time.
Thank Thank you, Councillor Isa. Would any other councillor like to speak on why this matter be considered urgent? Councillor Sypek, you seconded the motion. Councillor Byrne.
Thanks, Mayor. The way I see it is that it relates to or arises out of a matter which has arisen since the distribution of the agenda, because there became known that there was consultation starting on the lights, and therefore it can't be conveniently deferred, because then we will miss the opportunity to sort of hit two birds with one stone. There is nothing that our constituents dislike more than being consulted so many different times and not actually seeing the end result. To be able to couple up consultation is, believe, what is Councillor Sharp's intention of this motion, therefore why I'm seeing that it would be classified as urgent. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. I also concur with Councillor Byrne, and another thing that our constituents dislike is potential wasting of funds, and consultation does cost money. So if we can join the two together for the site, I think it makes a lot of sense from a cost-saving perspective. So I'm happy to support that for the purposes of it being urgent.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'm happy to support the admission of this as an urgent item. I'm not fussed if the consultation is the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, or the cost effectiveness of the consultation or the merit of the motion at all. But I do think it's arisen since the publishing of the agenda, or since last Tuesday, and consultation is starting in the coming week. So regardless of the merit of that consultation, regardless of the merit of the ultimate motion, in terms of hitting that urgent business governance Rule 25 threshold, I'm happy to support the admission of this as an urgent item.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak? As there has been dissent, I will ask Councillor Sharp if she would like to provide a right of reply.
Well, thank you, Mayor. The only reply I have is that the matter is urgent and qualifies under the governance rules. Councillors may have differing opinions on that, but my belief is that it is urgent, and sorry, my computer's just gone off. And once we come to the debate, I'm sure that I'm happy to explain it further. But as it is, it complies with the urgent business governance rule.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. I'll put that to the vote as to being considered urgent. All those in favour? That is Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Nation, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Tyson. All those against? Councillor Isa. I declare that motion carried. I will now invite Councillor Sharp, now that your matter has been accepted as an item of urgent business. I'll ask you to move your motion in relation to consultation with the community.
Thank you, Mayor. So my motion is that Council resolves to A, consult with the community on the installation of the synthetic pitch and associated lighting at JH Allen Reserve at the same time as consultation occurs with the community on the proposed lights for the existing pitch, which is occurring the week of 20th of February 2023. B, obtain cost estimates for the installation of the synthetic pitch and associated lighting to inform upcoming budget discussions for 23-24. And C, receive a report on the consultation findings and budget estimates for both proposals by the 4th of April 2023.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sypek. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, the motion's really clear. It's requesting community consultation on proposals within our soccer strategy that were endorsed last year. So I was alerted to the fact that we intended to consult with the community on the installation of lights at the existing soccer pitch at J.H. Allen Reserve next week. Now, at this location, the soccer strategy also proposes the installation of a new synthetic pitch and associated lighting. Obviously, for me anyway, it makes sense to consult on both proposals at the same time. It saves us money, time. As Councillor Video mentioned earlier, our residents do not like to be constantly consulted, and when we do consult a lot, we often don't get responses, or we get inadequate responses because people just ignore our requests. So I don't want to go down that track. I would much prefer to see a consultation process that is thorough, and what this motion is asking for is it's expanding the consultation which is already highlighted or already happening for next week. So look, I'm not going to argue the merits of the proposals that are included in this motion, because that's not what this is about. This is about having consultation on those proposals so we as a council group can understand the community sentiment around these ideas. I will, however, argue the merits of beginning consultation on aspects of the soccer strategy. The soccer strategy was endorsed late last year and has been welcomed by our soccer community. It provides good ideas and proposes good solutions. However, I strongly believe we need to get on with the job of acting on these proposals and understanding the way forward. The strategy is seen as somewhat of a holy grail. However, unless we start acting and tackling tangible outcomes that our soccer clubs and ourselves can see, the strategy won't be any holy grail, and it will be one of the biggest embarrassments to this council. So the strategy clearly states that the current demand is for 2 additional soccer fields in 2022. We're now in the year 2023, so we are already behind, and that's why consultation is so important. So we can understand the issues, if there are any, or if there are. We need to understand the issues as a council group so we can move forward. We can't sit back and wait another 12 months. For me, it feels like we just constantly go around in circles. So we're consulting with the community at J.H. Allen next week, and I would really like to see us expand that consultation. So at least, as I said, this is just all about getting the feel of the community. We as a council value community consultation, and it's obviously the first vital step in this process to help guide us in the way forward on options within our soccer strategy. And we're not going to know whether we move these proposals forward or not until we ask. And we really need to start asking the questions so that we can start making the big decisions, because that's what we all sit around this table here to do. We need to ask the questions. I am hoping councillors can see it's not about the issues. This motion is not about the issues on the table. It's about getting feedback from our community at the right time. I believe the right time is now, and I'd really like to understand their ideas and thoughts so that we can move forward. That's really the crux of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp, and my microphone was off, so I apologise for that. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Nearly every second week I'm at JH Allen, whether I'm watching a soccer match, a cricket match, or sharing a cup of coffee and some cakes with some pensioner groups there. It's a very, very active park there, and where they're looking at putting the synthetic pitch and lights is on across the road, where it's sort of pretty much barren land. But the residents around there, they are actually very, very active, very active. I speak to them, like I said, nearly every second week, where they all come out and they all actually support the local clubs. They actually come out of their houses and support the clubs, and some of them even come to some of these pensioner groups. And they come out every single time. Every single time they're all popping out, and they all talk about, John, you're not putting lights here. John, you're not putting lights here, because many, many years ago, there was a massive push to push lights there, and the community there just didn't want lights. So they're always asking about consultation, always. So I thank Councillor Sharp for bringing this up, and like I said, this is just a matter of expanding the consultation of what we ask them, rather than just doing it once for certain things and then going back and doing it again. Let's just do it all in one hit. There's no harm in this. This is just common sense.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor, through you. Look, I support this motion. I think it's a really sensible idea. If we look at the soccer strategy, which we've recently endorsed, under JHL and Reserve in the short-term options, being 2022 to 2025, it does state that we increase the capacity with lighting and add an additional synthetic field. So if we're to deliver on both of those, as stipulated in the report, we really need to be getting the consultation moving now. We know how sometimes it can take us a little bit longer in council when working with budget timelines and whatnot. So if we're to complete this by 2025, we really need to have some sort of pre-consultation done now, so that we could look to include this in an upcoming budget cycle, if we're to adhere to the timelines in the report. And I do concur with Councillor Sharp. We spend a lot of time and money debating these reports. However, a lot of the time when these reports come out, we don't actually end up adhering to the timelines or the action points of what they say. So I think it's a really logical step that while we're doing consultation, we might as well do a site-wide consultation for everything that we're putting forward for this site. And I'd encourage that across all of everything that's in our short-term options, or anything that we're looking to do with the soccer clubs in the soccer strategy. I think if there's multiple actions to be done on a field, we might as well consult on everything that we're looking to do in that field, as opposed to coming back to the community twice. I think it makes a lot more sense. So happy to support this, and I think it was a really good pick-up from Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, the matter arose, yes, very close to this meeting. So sorry, I'm just catching up on a little bit of the issue. And I just wanted to make a couple of comments that, firstly, I'm not confident that, with the idea that we'll consult on the installation of the synthetic pitch and associated lighting, I'm not confident that we would be mature enough in our thinking that the consultation on that wouldn't need to happen again. But that doesn't mean that I don't think that we should go out and ask the question. So I don't think that this, that if this motion were to pass, that it would necessarily mean we don't have to continue that conversation with the community once we get to further along the master planning road. However, I would say that, we are aware that there are some, when we approved the soccer strategy, we were aware through that consultation process that there are some concerns about this immediate option of JH Allen, and I don't think that there's any harm. In fact, I think it would be useful for our officers who are moving into feasibility on the master plan to have some of the community views, and the update we got notes that they'll be considering community usage needs, etc. I think that could be usefully informed by adding a couple of questions to the consultation that's considered for the same area on a similar but slightly different topic starting next week. So whilst I'm not convinced by the argument about it being necessarily an efficiency, I do think there's something to be gained by considering some questions around some of the longer term plans that we're considering for the site, and for that reason I'm happy to support. I do have some reservations about point B, just in the sense that I wouldn't want it to be viewed the installation of synthetic pitches is something that requires a lot of thought, and I wouldn't want the community to view that as us moving too quickly on something like this. But having said that, Councillor Sharp raises some valid points about making sure that we continue to move forward, and what's requested here is just some estimates so that we are fully informed when we get to the next decision-making point, whenever that may be, whether it's through this round of consultation or whether it's post a master plan consultation. But I just want to be clear that, the inclusion of that here doesn't predetermine that we are going to talk to residents about the suitability of a synthetic pitch. Thanks.
Thank you. Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Councillor Isa.
Thanks. Look, I just wanted to be really clear that I wasn't debating the merits earlier, and I'm not even really debating the merits now. My concerns at the moment are just around timing and process, because master planning consultation is very different to lighting consultation. And my understanding from the email that we were sent this evening is that the consultation for the synthetic pitch was part of the master planning. And my query around the urgency, because urgent motions need to qualify by not being able to be conveniently delayed. And so my question was going to how we make sure this master planning consultation happens thoroughly. The point made by Councillor Bettio around 2025, I think if we tried to do as urgent business everything that needed to be done by 2025, Councillor Bettio, we might have some problems. But my concerns are really around timing. And to that end, Mayor, I might just ask a question, if I may, through you, potentially to the Director of Strategy and Planning, which again goes to timing. And I was just wondering whether the consultation on the lighting, whether the timing for that was, the intention was that it come back by the 4th of April 2023. I'm just trying to understand that particular timing in the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. I'll ask the CEO whether she or the Director of Strategy Planning would like to answer the question.
I can ask the director to come to the speaker, but I do want to remind the councillor this is urgent business item, so council officers may not have relevant information. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor. The CEO is correct. I don't have all of the information on when the feedback from our intended letter to residents about the possibility of lighting the area. I'm not sure when we're going to finalise that, so producing a council report by that date could be challenging.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Isa, you have the call.
Thank you. In which case I have some further concerns about point C in terms of making sure that that's actually not that whether that is achievable by officers. Look, I can, I understand the impatience to get infrastructure done from the soccer strategy, but we have dozens of strategies and we're all impatient to get things done across the municipality. The consultation that's planned for next week was about some lighting, as far as I understand, it's about some lighting for one of the pitches. Adding into that a project that is meant to be part of master planning is, I think, putting our officers under considerable pressure and then asking them to come back with that by the 4th of April. I think it's also jumping the gun in terms of giving our residents meaningful consultation. I don't think we've got the information to go out to consultation with around the synthetic pitch. I think the point B also jumps the gun in that it's asking for cost estimates on something on which we're going out for consultation on. So I think there's been many different processes rolled into an urgent business tonight that I understand come from a place not impatience, sorry, I understand come from a place of desire to really make sure this soccer strategy is implemented, and I empathise with that. But we need to, I've heard in this chamber a number of times the need for us to deal with through master planning processes and to treat that as a serious precursor to infrastructure. And I feel that this is cutting across that. And I've never heard a resident ever complain about having too much consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. With reflections on each point just now, I might consider splitting the motion. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Byrne.
Thanks, Mayor, and I think that probably shows a bit of a difference between Rosehill Ward and Moonee Ward, because I definitely have had many people complain about too much consultation, whereas maybe Moonee Ward residents are slightly different. But I've definitely, residents up our neck of the woods have a really high level of frustration, actually, of being consulted on things that they don't see done. And the Queen Grove precinct plan that has been consulted on for, 6 years now, and not seeing a shovel in the ground is one of them. But moving on from that and on to this, it actually reminds me a little bit of when I was first on council in 2016, there was a motion moved on budget night which involved councillors being so fed up with so little being done that there was a motion that moved, I think it was the pavilion upgrades at Due to Stars, Overland Reserve, Ormond Park, there might have been something else in there as well. And it was basically councillors just saying, we've got to get this stuff done, here's the money, go do it. Now, off the back of that, after then coming onto council in 2016, you could sort of see how that didn't really quite work, because then officers were coming back saying, you got your numbers wrong, councillors. We saw your intention, but you actually need a lot more. So what I see in this motion is Councillor Sharp probably preempting that and going, well, if we're going to be pushing things along in this soccer strategy, let's get a bit of an estimate of potentially what the installation of a synthetic pitch might come back at. And it might come back, with a rough number, but it might also come back with more than just the cost of a synthetic. It might say, well, a synthetic is this, but then the hybrid at Moreland, when they put that in, was this. It might come back with a bit more to it, so that if there was anything going in at budget, it wouldn't be just a number plucked out of anywhere. J.H. Allen Reserve is a beautiful part of East Keilor, but it is underutilised, and people do want to see it utilised more. But it also has some very sensitive interfaces, and I'm very mindful that the consultation has to be appropriate. So I'm comfortable with this, and having spoken to Councillor Sharp a lot about it, thank you for bringing this up, because I think you really do understand some of the concerns that ward councils have raised in regards to these interfaces. And whilst we want to get things done in the soccer strategy, I think knowing how the residents potentially will interact. But I actually think that this is exciting, that we might be getting somewhere with this. I don't think it needs to be seen as a negative thing. And I think, as I mentioned before, that it's a proactive thing, trying to find some numbers and seeing what community want. And you know what? If they turn around and say absolutely no to the synthetic, then we can just cross it out before we do even more consultation. Easy.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Adams and Councillor Nation haven't spoken yet. Would you like to speak? Councillor Nation?
Thanks, Mayor. They might also say, yes, we want lights, but not if it's a synthetic pitch, because then it's going to get used year round, where we know a grass pitch will have a little bit of respite in some months. So, look, I'm happy to support this, because it's in line with our soccer strategy. It's also, me as a councillor, it's going to make me more informed when future decisions are made, both on what the community in the area think, what the users of the pitch think, and also costs as well as to how much upgrading the pitch, putting in a synthetic pitch, is going to cost. I think the discussion around master plans is interesting, and it's been good to hear the debate and the discussion. For me, my personal opinion is that this is a little bit different in my eyes in regards to being a master plan, or everything having to wait until there's a master plan, because we've had a soccer strategy come through these chambers on a number of instances, and as Councillor Sharp elaborated, that soccer strategy suggests we need to deliver two new pitches within a certain time frame. There's a number of different sites where those pitches could go, but if we were to wait for a master plan to be done of each of them, or the processes to take place, whatever that site is up to, whether it's got a master plan or it needs a master plan refresh or it doesn't have a master plan, there'll be no delivery of anything by the end of this term, maybe well into 2025. So I think we are in a unique situation that we have committed to delivering these extra pitches in the endorsed soccer strategy. We need to then actually find out where they're going to be practical and usable, and where residents are actually going to, I guess, approve their location. And therefore, I don't have any hesitation consulting on a synthetic pitch prior to any master plan process being completed, because in my personal opinion, I see it as consistent with our soccer strategy. So I'm happy to support this motion in its entirety.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Adams, would you like to speak? No. Councillor Sharp, I will give you right of reply.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll try and be quick, but I do want to touch on one important point. The soccer strategy that was passed last year and has been communicated to all clubs states that at JH Allen Reserve we were going to increase the lighting and add one additional synthetic field, obviously based on community consultation. It was not obviously based upon a master plan. We have not endorsed a master plan for JH Allen, and in my experience in my terms on council, we've always endorsed master plans. So to have information provided to us at 5:30 at night telling us that now we're doing pre-planning for a master plan, well, we haven't endorsed it. So I get very concerned when things like these matters are raised with us at the times when they are raised with us, because it feels like certain issues are being purposefully delayed. Now, I hope and trust that that is not the case, but if we were told last year when we were talking about the soccer strategy...
Councillor Sharp, I'll caution you to avoid criticising officers. Please continue.
Yes, thank you. If we were told last year that we were going to have to do a master planning process at JH Allen Reserve, I don't think the additional synthetic field or the increase in capacity with lighting would have been marked in the short term, because master plans take 2 years. So I'm really upset, I guess, by having another spanner thrown in the works, and I really hope that councillors can see the thought in this.
Councillor Sharp, I'll give you an extra 15 seconds to close.
Sorry, thank you. We need to get feedback from the community in order to move these matters along, and I thank all councillors for the support and comments. But we need to do something, and we need to act now, and many of you have mentioned that, so I thank you very much, and let's just see what the consultation comes back with.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Having considered the debate, I will split the motion into A, B and C for 3 separate votes. I will put first to the vote Part A. All those in favour? That is Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Nation, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Tyson. All those against? Councillor Isa. That is carried. I will now put section B to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Nation, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Tyson. All those against? That is Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa. Part B is carried, and I will now put Part C to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Nation, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Sypek. All those against? That is Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa, Councillor Tyson. I declare that carried. The motion is carried in full. Thank you, councillors. Item 12 is confidential reports, and we have one listed on the agenda this evening. Item 12.1, extension of contract number 20/113, Move Aquatic and Fitness Facilities Management and Operations. And I understand Councillor Nation has declared a conflict of interest on the item.
Yes, I've declared a conflict. I'll leave the chambers and bid you good night.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Item 12.1, extension of contract number 20/113, Move Aquatic and Fitness Facilities Management and Operations, contains confidential information relating to council business information, being information that would prejudice the council's position in commercial negotiations if prematurely released, and private commercial information, being information provided by a business, commercial or financial undertaking that, if released, would unreasonably expose the business, commercial or financial undertaking to disadvantage as it contains commercial in confidence tendered rates. Councillors, I need a motion that Council resolves to close the meeting to the public pursuant to Section 66(2) of the Local Government Act 2020 to consider the aforementioned items. Councillors, do I have a mover? Councillor Byrne, and a seconder, Councillor Adams. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. This is now where we say goodnight to the members of the public who are watching from home. Thank you for joining us this evening, and have a great night.